Welcome to another edition of the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. He is the Legendino, aka the Wikipedia, if you're a Yank, Tim Vickery, who is in Rio.
And he, with his bucket and spade and his saucy holiday postcard, is the king of nighttime radio, who's currently doing other things during nighttime. Dotun Adebayo, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thanks very much. And we do like to be beside the seaside. The seaside for me is the River Lee. You might know it. No bucket and spades there, mate. You need a flipping pickaxe and shovel to get any sand. Anyway, great to see you back. So another pair of shades. You're going red today, yeah?
Yeah, it's kind of red. It combines nicely with the green shirt.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't combine well at all with the green shirt, and it's very bright here. It's my kind of winter. It's
bright here as well, but we just can't afford the number of sunglasses that you got, mate. Flipping out. How many more do we have to endure? I'm going to have to go to the shop to get a couple.
I think I've used them all now. I've got a few recently. I've got 3 pairs recently.
Yeah, well, you can always recycle them. Always recycle. So they do good business in sunshades over in Brazil today, when you're about, anyway.
Indeed.
Listen,
what it is as you get older, I'm getting a bit worried about my eyes. You know what I mean? I've got Barry Norman eyes. You know, the bags under them and so on, and from obviously hideous overwork and 40 years of wearing contact lenses. So I think I kind of look younger somehow if I.
So you wear contacts? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've been wearing contacts since the summer of 1981. So next year will be 40 years.
Flipping out! You kept that quiet.
Yeah, well, that's the point of contact lenses, isn't it? Really.
Yes, that is the point. That is true. I can't argue that, mate. I can't argue that. I forgot. I who've got 20/20 vision, yeah, like hell, but for the meantime have been able to avoid wearing glasses. I remember an optician telling me about 5 years ago when I went to the opticians, it's probably more than 5 years, probably about 8 years ago now. I went to the optician, sort of like saying, look, my eyes, mate, my eyes. And he's like, look, can you just stretch out a little bit? Because, once you go for the glasses, then that's it. That's the point of no return.
Yeah.
Stretched it. And here I am still. I'm still able to see probably better than I could 8 years ago. So it just goes to show the eyes are powerful, mate. Always sort of like try and put off wearing contact lenses for as long as you can, unless you're as blind as a bat as you seem to be now.
I am, and you're right. The day after, you are utterly dependent on them. The day after, it just doesn't. Nothing works without them. So it does. The element of dependence on them does worry me. And I often think, let's imagine I'm in a plane and it's in an emergency, because on a long flight, I'll usually take them out.
Mm-hmm.
And they say you can't go back for anything. You got to abandon the plane. I often think about this.
You would go back for your contact lenses?
I would.
Come off it, mate. I remember when Nobby Stiles was the first footballer in the top flight to wear contact lenses. At that time, they were 200 quid a pair. 200 quid would probably be like 10 grand now to most of us. And at that time, whoever was commentating for Match of the Day or whatever said, so what happens if one of them pops out and it falls on the pitch? They said, well, you're going to have to call a halt to the match. And everybody's got to get down on their knees and look for it at that price. Those are the days when, money was money, mate.
I still remember the gorgeous kind of auburn, almost Diana Rigg, who just left us, style hair, that kind of hair. Having a slow dance.
That's not Nobby Stiles.
No, that wasn't Nobby Stiles. No, I can't remember her name. But in that slow dance, I lost a lens at the. It was a youth club disco. No, it was a bit older than youth club disco. Some kind of disco thing. When I
why didn't you invite me to any of these discos, mate? You went on your own. Flipping. See, typical blokes, they don't want to invite their friends because then they'll have competition.
Indeed,
that Diana Rigg lookalike. Actually, it hurt me, Diana Rigg, a little bit because that she belongs to an era of us. I feel sorry for her because she was such a great actress and she did many other roles, but she'll always be remembered for one, which is The Avengers.
But it was great. It was fantastic, The Avengers. I love that there's a real partnership between Steve, Patrick McNee, and her, a real partnership.
Chemistry.
And yeah, there's chemistry, but it's also partnership. And there was once where the director was saying to Patrick Nini, can you order Mrs. P or Diana Rigg to do something? And he said, no, she's not my assistant. She's my partner. And I think that was great. And it kind of set a tone. And you wonder with someone like Diana Rigg, how many lives did she influence? Young girls seeing that thinking, I could do that. Because you got to see it to be it.
She did the karate kicks way before Bruce Lee. Although on reflection, she basically raised her legs, mate. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but it wasn't the roundhouse kick that we know from Bruce Lee whatsoever. And I think and it was always male baddies that she was up against. They gave in a little bit too easily to her. Are
you doubting the realism of this show?
Yeah, knee-high leather boots or patent leather boots, as the style was at that time. But she was a fashion icon as well. And let's not forget what her name was in the Avengers. Do you remember?
Yeah, Emma Peel. Man Appeal. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and also she's getting less money than the cameraman. So
really?
She's working. She found that out. She's working in a totally sexist context, but the message that she is able to send transcends that. And I think that's that's something that will live forever. What a legacy.
And then 50 years later, she shows up in Game of Thrones. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I've never seen it, and nor had she.
No, really? She never saw it?
No.
She never saw it? She was brilliant in it, though. She was absolutely... I mean, first of all, it's kind of like, is that Diana Rigg? Is that who I think it is? Because, you haven't seen her for a while, unless you've been in the theatre and all that. And then you think, it's got to be Diana Rigg, because she's stealing the flipping scene. Every scene she's in, she's like she's nicking the flipping scene off the lead stars and everything. He thought, nah, that's her, mate. That's Diana Rigg. That's Diana Rigg all over. And when I'm going to give something away for you now. I'm going to reveal something. When she meets her doom in Game of Thrones, it is actually, shall I even bother watching this anymore? Because they ripped the heart out of your desire for the program, and she was amazing in that. I'll say that. And yeah, you're right. What a legacy! And died with her boots on, well, not those knee-high ones, but nevertheless, died with her boots on, by all accounts.
This link that we started off with today between the past and the present, I think that's very, very appropriate for our topic today. The game that we're gonna riff around. It's an FA Cup final that went to a replay. It's Manchester United against Brighton from 1983. And if you look at this, and we can both remember the time, it's totally, totally different from today's world. But it's at a moment where today's world is beginning to be forged.
I like the way you did that. For those who don't know, on this Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, every week we look at a particular iconic match from somewhere in football history. It tends to be dominated by the English leagues, I won't lie, but we do foray into the South American, the European leagues, and anywhere else there might be iconic football matches. We'll get to Africa, we'll get to Asia, and we'll get to all the other parts of the world as well, North America included. Don't worry, guys. But today, as you say, Tim, it's the 21st of May, 1983, FA Cup final between Manchester United, who need no introduction whatsoever. They are the Goliaths in this final against the Minnows of Brighton. Nobody gives Brighton a hope of putting one over on Manchester United. Nobody gives them a hope whatsoever. You've already given the game away that goes into a replay, but that's all good because we can look at the day's newspapers at the time to see what they were writing about this match. Yeah. And
the replay was on the 26th. So it's 21st of May, the game, and then the replay is the 26th, and in between I turned 18. What a moment in a young man's life.
Oh wow. Okay.
The day before, the 25th I turned 18.
Then I must have just turned 16 or something about that
something
time.
Like that, yes.
Yeah, something like that. I can't do my maths. You know I can't do my maths. So don't ask me to do them. But the match is played as the other half of Britain, the maybe non-footballing half of Britain, is considering the coming elections. So 1983 elections, important elections, that will see the Tories win power once again. I've just come back from Sweden. In fact, I'm halfway between Sweden and England at this point. I didn't even realize, whilst this game is going on, guess who's visiting Sweden? No idea?
No idea.
You see, I had no idea either. Do you know, Her Majesty the Queen has gone on the Royal Yacht Britannia, which will glide through the allegedly Soviet submarine infested waters of the Stockholm archipelago, carrying not just the Queen, but Prince Philip on their first state visit to Sweden for 27 years. Now, shall I tell you about this Russian submarine? Do you want to know? Do you remember it?
No, I don't.
Okay, Stockholm is part of an archipelago of islands. If you go, what we call, well, I say we, the Swedes call skärgården, which kind of means pink garden, maybe. And all these little tiny islands. It's brilliant. You know, you can own an island in Sweden. And if you've got a boat, loads of Swedes have got boats, their own boats. They've got their country houses as well, you know, little, you know, cabins in the countryside with a lot of land around it, because there's only 8 million of them in a country that's 2.5 times the size of Britain. So they've got a lot of land to play with. And if you've got a boat, you can travel through skärgården. And every now and then, remember, I was still traveling on my Nigerian passport at this point. Every now and then you see a sign saying no foreigners allowed on this island. Wow. Yeah, because it's militarily sensitive. Because the only ways that Sweden can fight a somewhat conventional war is unconventionally, through sort of guerrilla tactics. So they've got all these sort of ammunition dumps all over the country. When I first went to Sweden, you know, people were robbing post offices with machine guns. I was like, wow, that's hardcore, mate. They don't need the money that bad, do they? But machine guns are very easy to get hold of, because all these ammunition dumps in the woods. And if you had done your military service, which you had to do at the time in Sweden, and that's another story that I'll come on to another time, if you'd done your military service and you were a quartermaster or whatever it is, you know, the boat that looks after all the kit, you will know where some of these dumps are. So these dumps are consistently getting broken into, and loads of machine guns stolen from them. And anyway, I'd seen all these signs. I mean, they do shit you up. You say, you know, utlänningar, you know, förbjud, which means, you know, no foreigners, you're forbidden. And you think, shit, okay, let me move on. But the Russian submarine, or should I say the Kremlin, didn't take a blind bit of notice out of this. So one day, guess who comes aground in skärgården? Obviously, you're in an archipelago. You're not quite in the Baltic Sea, so the archipelago won't be as deep as the Baltic Sea. So this Russian submarine's come over from Russia, come across the Baltic Sea, and guess what? It's gone aground in the relatively shallow waters around the Swedish archipelago, and it's got nowhere to go, and it's like a sore thumb sticking out. So it takes the cops a couple of hours to get all these reports, you know, to believe all the reports of people saying, I think there's a submarine stuck in skärgården and it's got a Russian flag or insignia on it. It takes them a couple of hours to realize this, and they rush over. And of course, the Russian captain, he knows he's going to be sent off to Siberia, and he's just like, just do what you can to get me the fuck out of here as quickly as possible before the news reaches home. But it takes a few days, maybe a couple of weeks or whatever it is. And eventually, after diplomatic and that, and a tugboat and that, they get out. So the Queen's going to Sweden at this time. Do you see why my mind wasn't focused on that FA Cup final as it would normally have been?
And Brighton ended up going down like the submarine, but they were so close to glory. And the FA Cup final back in those days was much bigger and much more important than it is now. Brighton were relegated that season. But had they won the FA Cup, that's a successful season. That's a great season. That's even. But you would rather win the FA Cup and get relegated than stay in the top flight and lose the FA Cup. That's how important the cup was.
I'm not sure about that, mate, because that was the problem
huge.
with Wigan. Do you remember when we won the FA
Cup? Yeah, but that's much later. That's when the Premier League. That's when the big money is in the Premier League.
But they've struggled to get anywhere near the top again. Really struggled. They've gone down and down.
But remember, Brighton would have had European football next season because they would have been in the Cup Winners' Cup. So that would have brought them some revenue, and they'd probably been able to come back. And the relegation would have been a minor hiccup. But they would have had the glory. Yeah, I think so. I think back in, because the whole country stopped for the FA Cup final. With a build-up starting at 7 a.m. and something. And there was a huge, although it's Brighton on the south coast, there was a huge Liverpool feel to it because the manager was an old Liverpool player. Jimmy Melia, who was one of those.
Wasn't it both managers?
The other one is Ron Atkinson, who's I don't know where he's from.
No, I think he's got Liverpool. I remember the commentary in the build-up, as you talk of, saying that both managers have got Liverpool connections, but I could be wrong there. It doesn't sound like he's a Scouser.
Jimmy Melia is one of those Scousers who could have been a stand-up comedian. There was that certain generation where all of them could either be musical stars or they could be stand-up comedians. And Jimmy Melia could certainly be a stand-up comedian. So he was very charismatic, and he played it all up for the cameras. And there was running their midfield was someone who just joined them from Liverpool, Jimmy Case. So there was a real Liverpool versus United feel.
It might have been the Jimmy Case thing that I was thinking about. Yeah, sorry, rather than Ron Atkinson. Apologies.
So there was a real kind of Liverpool against United feel around it anyway. And Brighton was so close to winning, so unbelievably close. It was a dramatic game. It was one of those FA Cup finals that is full of ebbs and flows, and Brighton managed to equalise. It looks like United have got it in the bag. They go 2-1 up. Ray Wilkins, who was a fabulous player, one of those players,
he was
unbelievably underrated.
Yeah, he was brilliant in this match, mate. One touch pass to the flipping foot of the player that you wanted to pass to.
Ray Wilkins these days, he would have been priceless because he had this habit of passing the ball to a player who was wearing the same coloured shirt, which these days is much more highly valued in English football than it was back then. And people were impatient with him because he didn't blast it forward. But he was great, Ray Wilkins, and he looked to have won it with a terrific goal. And then United, maybe it's that thing of being so close to victory, they went to pieces. And in the last few minutes, Brighton not only get an equaliser, but with the last kick of the game, Michael Robinson, who went off, what a reinvention there, Michael Robinson. He went off to Spain and ended up having a new career on Spanish media as a massively respected and much loved football journalist in Spanish. He would always talk about Spain as we. He sets up a chance for Gordon Smith. Gordon Smith is one-on-one with the United goalkeeper, Gary Bailey. It's the last kick of the game, and he doesn't shoot well, and Bailey manages to save it. So Brighton were so close to winning. And now they've got to wait for a replay. But there's good news for the replay, because their talismanic captain, centre-back, wild man with a headband, who went to the World Cup with England the year before, Steve Foster, he's suspended for the first game, but he's able to play in the replay. So they can have Steve Foster back. Mm-hmm. So that's going to tighten up their defence even more, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. No. Oh, it didn't. Oh, obviously it didn't. No. Okay, you see, you've jumped the gun and you've gone on to the next match. But you did mention that FA Cup, the romance of the FA Cup, as they describe it, starts very early on the Saturday morning of the Cup. For those of us youngsters, certainly, in Britain, youngsters and those supporting either team. It starts off early. You get your bunting out, particularly if it's your local team, and you hang it from your house to your neighbour's house across the street so that everybody in the neighbourhood knows, we're in an FA Cup final. So for my neighbourhood of Tottenham, there was none of this because it was Man United versus Brighton. But I could imagine what it was like at Old Trafford, and not the city end of Manchester. They're the only real team in Manchester after all. So let's talk about Salford, in the Old Trafford end of Salford, as the city lot would like to say. I imagine that the bunting was hanging. And this was before what has happened now, which is the development of that entire area. This is probably in the days of the old Manchester Ship Canal, and ships were coming in from Brazil and Canary Islands and everywhere
or
else.
possibly the ships were stopping coming in.
Ah.
Or maybe because it was a hard time, 83.
Well,
Really, really hard
industrially,
time.
economically, yeah. Let's
all
not forget
over the
that's
place.
the
And not
backdrop. Yeah.
this is exactly the moment when I left school. I did me A levels right after this this game, and then I left school. And I was living in Hemel Hempstead, which is light industry, new town, relatively prosperous.
Just north of London.
Yeah, it was London overspill, really. That was the point of it. No jobs. There was absolutely no prospect of any. And I had all the O levels, all the A levels, and so on. I was lined up to get a job on a local paper, and that went bust. Everything was going bust. So I was trying to. I spent all that long hot summer trying to get a job, and I couldn't even get interviews for anything. But anything. At the end of the summer, kind of the start of September, I got a job. Finally got a job, which was in a menswear shop, 50 quid a week. And
50 quid a week, even then, that was tight, mate. That was rough.
Yeah, that was yeah.
Even then, yeah.
That was shop work for you. And I've in my second week there, the company went into liquidation. So I ended up working there because it was like a closing down sale. Yeah. And it was a chain, and lots of the branches kept on closing, and we were getting the stock. So I got about eight or 9 months out of it until the thing finally ended and finally went under. But this was Hemel, and you couldn't even dream of jobs. And it's luckily for me, I had all the bits of paper, and I could go to college, and they paid you to go to college.
Oh, yeah,
never even imagined going to university. But I thought I've got to get out of this job market for 3 years. For people who didn't have that backup, blimey, and people living in areas that were worst affected than my area was, absolutely nothing. It was really tough times, 1983. You did well to get out of it and go to Sweden, I think.
Well, I was out of it before that. The moment Mrs. Thatcher got in power, I was like, oh, it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough. Yeah. Let me go and decamp somewhere else. And lucky enough, I was able to get the opportunity education-wise, just like you. It was education that got us lot out of the conditions we were in, to be honest, and gave us a chance in life. And but back to the match, and you've raised a couple of really interesting points. The preamble to the match, which we've both seen. John Motson commentating for hours. It would have been in those days, preamble wise, and then the match itself, and so on. Starts off by saying that these teams, they're going to have a bonus if they win the match. They're going to have a financial bonus on their salary. Do you remember how much he said it was? A few £1,000s, which would have been like amazing to a lot. For the Brighton lot, certainly would have been amazing. And then the camera pans on, which is a good old British tradition. I know other countries have done it, but good old British tradition, which is the homemade banner. The homemade banner. Nowadays, if you saw a homemade banner on a pitch, you just say, clear off. It's going to buy yourself a proper banner. Everybody can afford it now. But in those days, we made them at home. It was DIY banners. And the one they couldn't believe, the commentators, the cameraman's panning along, and there's one that says, Whiteside, normal Whiteside, of course, Manchester United's 18-year-old midfield genius, as he was. Well, as he would be, certainly. And it says, Whiteside's going to be on his backside, after this match. I thought that was very good. And the referee at the time, a bloke called Alf Gray, he says in the paper of the day that he'll have no hesitation in sending off a player for the first time in FA Cup final history if a professional foul is committed against a man with a clear goal chance. I just hope the situation does not arise, the Bird's Eye Foods manager from Great Yarmouth said yesterday. Readers will remember that Liverpool's goalkeeper Grobbelaar was only cautioned for what many thought a dismissal offence in this season's Milk Cup final. So 1983, we still haven't had a single player in the 60-year history, 60 years of history at this point of the FA Cup. Not one player has ever been sent off, which suggests to me that the FA Cup had not just the gravitas, but had the reverence and the respect that was it. Nobody would want to be the first player to be sent off.
Yeah, but also it was really hard to get sent off. You
In
really
those
had
days,
to
yeah.
try and get sent off. And I remember 1980, Willie Young of Arsenal, little Paul Allen of West Ham with squeaky little voice. He squeaked his way past Willie Young.
That's
And
Alan
he's
Ball
one of,
right there, mate. Squeaky
it was
little voice.
it was just like that. He's one-on-one with a goalkeeper, and Willie Young just hauls him down. And these days, there's no argument. It's a red card. Yeah. Back then, the commentator, had to do it. Had to do it.
It was a man's game back then, mate. Yeah. It was like rugby, wasn't it? Do you know how much referee Alf Gray was getting paid for this?
What? To be a referee or to be a bird's eye food manager? Well, if I was on 50 quid a week, he's got to work for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
He's still going to get more than me, I fear.
Yeah. No, funny enough, he didn't.
Wow, you're joking.
He got 40 quid. 40 quid. Yes. Yeah, I know you're happy. He'll pick up 40 quid for his labour today, which he reckons will just about pay him back for all the 2 bob bits and 10 pence pieces he has used for tossing up and then given to club mascots over the years. Today, he will use a 1960 half crown from his collection of coins from 1935 onwards, the date of his birth. The coin has particular relevance for 1980 was the year he first started refereeing in local Norfolk leagues. In 3 years, he made it to the top flight of refereeing.
Wow.
That ain't bad, is it?
Fast track.
So, and he is significant in this game in that he allows it to flow. You mentioned some of those tackles. I can't imagine a referee today wouldn't have been blowing their whistle every 30 seconds of this match, or every 45 seconds, whatever it would be.
It's a different game, isn't it? And ploughed fields for pitches, and a lot of agricultural tackling going on. It's a different game.
Yeah. Apparently, the man in black, as he always was then, had also been a bass singer in their choir in Galston-on-Sea, where he lives, for the last 15 years. And his first love, what was that, sporting-wise?
His first love, where was he from again?
Well, he lived in Galston-on-Sea.
Surfing.
No, it was, you don't like cricket? Oh, I know. You love it. But as he's a singer, should we take a look at the charts of the day? This is what we do.
I think we should. I think we should, because I think it's a very relevant chart.
Yeah.
We're talking about 83 is the moment of the Thatcherite triumph. Despite the fact that things are hard, things are really hard, but that Falklands War a year earlier it bought her time, didn't it? And it
bought her votes as well.
Yeah, and it moved the political landscape, and it enabled her to plough full speed ahead with her project. And although times are really hard, you can look at this chart and you can see that in comparison, say, with the charts of 2 years earlier, there's a much more frivolous generation emerging. Now, the chart of, say,
in comparison to the punk of a few years earlier.
Well, not only punk, but 2 years earlier, with a lot of riots going on, the theme tune to that summer was Ghost Town by the Specials.
Yeah.
And if you look at this chart, there's one record that it's just come in as a new entry at 12, Money Go Round by the Style Council, which got me through my A-levels in just a blaze of fury. But a lot of them, there's a kind of new frivolous feel to what's going on.
I do agree with you in terms of lyrics. You had all these flipping new romantic.
I'm not necessarily saying that as a criticism.
No. But I do. I'm not criticising them either. Funny enough, I think this period delivered some of the most memorable melodies of certainly my lifetime, actually, because some of the melodies are great. But I wonder whether the music, first of all, it's permeated by that flipping drum machine sound of the 80s, which destroyed
that's really coming big time.
Oh my word, it destroyed that era.
The first time I really remember it well, I thought it was revolutionary was, remember the Whispers and the beat goes on a
Yes,
few years,
yes,
2 or 3 years earlier, and
yes.
you're hearing something new. You're hearing something less organic.
Funny enough, the first time I heard it was slightly before that. I think it was the first time it really registered. Anyway, was Herbie Hancock's Rocket. Do you remember Herbie Hancock came out with that instrument? It was amazing in the hip hop days. It was absolutely amazing. That's the first time I really sort of like was cognizant of the beatbox, because I think before that it had been used as a kind of you try to get the drum, the authentic drum sound out of it. I remember, we had a kind of a beatbox thing going on in the band that I played in, but we tried to get as close to the authentic. Whereas in the 80s, they said, no, let's just have this tinny sound that it's very clear that it's a beatbox rather than try and imitate the drummer. The drummer can do his thing. You can have a beatbox on top of the drummer kind of thing sometimes. And I think what they lost sight, because synth was taking over at this point. The synth was, arguably synth had taken over from Gary Newman's days and Kraftwerk days, or at least it'd been there all the time. But the synthesizer, they still called it the Moog. Do you remember that? They called it the Moog synthesizer. It had a kind of a name, whereas now it had become an instrument in its own right, rather than a device to add a little bit of texture, as Stevie Wonder would have done in Superstition. Now it had become an instrument in its own right, rather than just being the equivalent of a wah-wah pedal or something like that. And
so you could make music cheaply, and it was spreading, to like Basildon, i.e. Depeche Mode, or Yazoo, who are in the charts,
or Spandau Ballet, who were number one in the charts at this point. Again, I say it's an amazing melody, certainly the ooh, 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 ooh of True. And I'm sorry, I can't do it as well as they've done it. They've done it very artistically, and I get that bit. And for me, that's the song, just the ooh, 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 and whatever they sing to it. I can't remember. The Sound of My Soul is what they're singing, I seem to remember. Anyway, apart from the ooh, 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 there's not much in it. When you start getting into the lyrics, you're just thinking, just piss off, will you? You're trying to be poetic. You're new romantics. You think you're Lord Byron. I'm sorry, I knew Lord Byron, and you, sir, are not he. And I'm not that old, but certainly familiar with his Don Juan. What men call love and the gods adultery is far more common where the climate's sultry. Now that's a better lyric than so true, funny how it seems, always in time, but never in line for dreams. What does that mean?
What does
that mean?
Yeah, he's been listening to Marvin all night long, but he ain't as good.
Oh, yeah, trust me, and Marvin's got a lot to answer for, but, mercy, mercy me, not this. We shouldn't put it on Marvin. And then at number 2, it's Temptation, which is not a bad song, parts of it, but you just wish they just stuck to the hook, which is the best bit,
Oh, I had a crush on her.
Oh, yes.
It was Carol Kenyon.
Oh, is that
I had a crush on her. I thought she was fantastic.
And Uncle Dotton's listening.
And well, she tried to launch a solo career after on the back of it, because she's great. She makes that song.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because it's Heaven 17, so it's that kind of dry and ironic electronic, and she just whips it up and makes it human. And she launched a solo career, but the material was just so terrible. I think people wanted it to succeed, but the songs were just so awful that it never got off the ground. I think she went back to being a backing singer.
She should have just stayed with Heaven 17. I don't know if they had more songs for her.
That was all that I desired.
Of course it was. Look, the problem, and there are 2 bands here, Heaven 17 and then Fun Boy 3 later on in the charts, and we'll come to Fun Boy 3 in just a moment. Fun Boy 3 are number 7 with Our Lips Are Sealed. Heaven 17, number 2 in the charts, the official UK charts of the 21st of May 1983, the day of this World Cup. Both Fun Boy 3 and Heaven 17 suffer from breaking up the formula, because you're right. Temptation, this is, I'm not making a sort of a racial point about this at all, but this is like white boys on, I wouldn't say speed or ecstasy, I wouldn't say drugs, but in terms of like just the the pace of which they're doing what should have been a much more subtle song. You know, there's this temptation where she's like higher and higher, temptation, because they can't quite feel the soul bit of it, and they probably tried to do temptation
Possibly
like the Temps
not.
would have done.
One of the greatest lines about music I've ever heard is from Keith Richards, who the guitarist of the Stones. And he was talking about, mainly I think he was talking about all those big head rock bands in the United States, all of them, and
all the Rushes and all of that.
That will all love him. But he would probably regard them with contempt, and I think rightly so. And he, because
I'm not sure about rightly, mate. I'm not sure about rightly.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Because what Keith Richards is and always has been is a missionary for black music.
Yeah, you could argue that. You could argue that.
So he said about all those groups, he said, you know what? They've got the rock, but they haven't got the roll. And that, in just a sentence, he summed up the deficiencies of all of those not only rock bands, but maybe the kind of plastic synth Heaven 17 things. Mm-hmm. They brought in Carole King to give them the roll. Because they didn't have the roll there. They couldn't roll by themselves.
But what would you rather have, the rock or the roll?
I'd rather have the roll.
Really?
Give me the roll.
A hammer or a nail?
As long as it's in someone else's hands, I don't mind. If I had a hammer, I'd give it to someone else.
I'd rather be a hammer than a nail. Yes, I would. If I only could, I surely would. So there we're going to have to differ. But number 3, and the reason why I said harsh on the rock stuff was because you can't have it both ways. If we're to say that all of those rock bands of that era fed off of Keith Richards' role, and they appropriated it in their way and regurgitated it in their way, then he does have as much to blame as we would say a moment or two ago that Marvin Gaye has something to answer for. When it comes to Candy Girl, it's all about Michael Jackson, mate. I mean, you may as well forget this lot and just bring on the Jackson 5 as they were, because this is their song. The dances of Michael Jackson, the voices of the New Edition at that time, their voices are of of Michael Jackson and Jackson 5 as they were at that moment. They weren't sort of like it wasn't new. It was great. It had a little bit of that 80s drum bit, but I would say that what
was a Jackson 5 retread.
It's a Jackson 5 retread that Motown should have done. It's like, why did New Edition, who were like the black inheritors of New Kids on the Block, I seem to remember, or one of those bands from those days, because I think they had exactly the same manager, if I recall, but I could be wrong there. My memory does serve me right. I seem to remember it was Maurice Starr of Atlantic Starr was the manager of at least one of those groups, and if not both of them. And I just wonder why it wasn't a Motown song, because Motown was struggling at this point, 1983. Yeah. They started struggling to become relevant, and here was other people taking on what they'd done before. Yeah, and they've got a lot to answer for New Edition. Not saying New Edition weren't brilliant. Those kids are talented. I'm not saying anything away from Bobby Brown.
I remember a piece in the music press with them around that time on a visit to London. Journo had spent the day with them in London, and he was a bit shocked. Because he thought, listening to Candy Girl, it's all sweet and so, and he spent a day with him. He said, they ain't sweet. These people.
No. Trust me, mate. I've been with Bobby Brown and his brother, his older brother. I can't remember him. Look, mate, they wanted to get laid as much as they could. Let's just put it that way. And that Candy Girl is saying, "Oh, she's my girl. Oh, Ronnie. Oh, who's your girl? Oh, he's my girl." Belle Biv DeVoe, Ronnie DeVoe, Ricky Bell, and Ricky Bell, Belle Biv, Michael Bivins, Ralph Tresvant, and Bobby Brown at that time were it was amazing. When I first saw them, the first time I heard that was on Top of the Pops, and I was like, wow. And it was kind of like coming from the hip hop scene as well, even though they'd taken all their moves from Michael Jackson, they'd taken it from Michael Jackson from was it the bad era of Michael Jackson? Yeah, I would have thought just the beginning of the bad era of Michael Jackson, which is kind of like hip hop moves that Michael Jackson's doing then, or hip hop has appropriated a lot of Michael Jackson's move and incorporated it into their breakdance, etc. So they're doing all the body popping stuff. And let's face it, the moonwalk, which was originated by, if not Michael Jackson, then
it's a fellow at Shalimar, isn't it?
Yeah,
Jeffrey
Daniels, who taught Michael Jackson, exactly. So you do know your history of this.
Yeah, well, in Shalimar, just when you talked about Motown, and I'm remembering losing my contact lens.
Okay.
Which is around that. Shalimar was like our Motown. You know, it was for my generation, the songs that, you know, the romantic tunes that for the earlier guys, it was Motown songs, and Shalimar was kind of that for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ferret ears.
Yeah.
Ferret ears. If you listen to "There It Is," it does sound like he's saying ferret ears.
Oh, don't worry.
When was the first black British musicians that you were aware of?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably one of the first ones that I was aware of would have been either Linda Lewis, ended up being a good mate of my missus's, by the way, or possibly, if it wasn't Linda Lewis, who would it have been then? Labby Sifri. Labby Sifri definitely would have been up there. Certainly stuck out to me as very British and probably even more British in a way than Linda Lewis. And those are probably the two that I can think of off the top of my head. But you know what you said, that Shalimar was our Motown. Well, at number four is Dancing Tight featuring Phil Fearon.
Yeah, which is a kind of, I liked his stuff at the time. It's openly lightweight, but really pleasant, and some, as you said earlier on, some good melodies.
Really good melodies. He's a great singer, a nice guy, and I think you're absolutely right, 100%. It's lightweight to what he would otherwise have been doing, because this is coming out of the Brit funk or Brit funk stroke Brit jazz movement that bubbled up just before that.
The first I remember of that was High Tension in about 78, and I thought they were fantastic. I thought they were a great band, High Tension.
And then there was Central Line. I think I mentioned before that I haven't, well, let me just put it there. There's a romantic link between me and
Central Line.
Obviously. No, not obviously. Not obviously. It wasn't, I didn't come out, with any sort of pride out of this one, man. It was embarrassing. So,
but there were all those things. There was like Beggar and Co. and stuff. There was a lot around. And one of the, Links. Mm-hmm. That intuition is one of the great black English records. But I mentioned this because you talked about the Fun Boy 3, and the Fun Boy 3 were a split off from the Specials, and I love the Specials. They weren't my band. My band at the time were more than the Jam, the early 80s, and then the Style Council afterwards. But I think the Specials are the most important thing we had.
I think so. I agree with you. They were the Sex Pistols of their day. In terms of when that two-tone thing blew up, that you had the Specials, the Selector, the Beat, who we're going to talk about because they're in the charts as well, and you had Madness, somewhat to the fringes of it, but they're all on the two-tone label. And clearly the Specials were a cut above the rest. Just like when you heard the Pistols, they were clearly a cut above the rest. Slightly different from the Clash, but I would argue they were a cut above the Clash as well. When a Pistols tune came out in 77, which was the year of punk, when the Pistols tune came out, it just blew everything away.
Steve Jones and great guitar player, Johnny Rotten singing.
Well, yeah, you had the great singing, Johnny Rotten, whereas the Clash were like a band. I think the Pistols were like four individuals in a band, if that makes sense. I remember just recently, not that long ago, you've referenced Keith Richards already. I'll reference Mick Jagger. Or maybe it was Keith Richards. Well, it was one of them who said, look, compared to the Beatles, was it you that told me this? I'm just wondering where I heard this anecdote from. Compared to the Beatles, like the Beatles had four members who could all sing, who could all be frontmen, whereas the Stones only had one. So the Beatles had an easier time in a way because everything had to be sort of channeled through Mick Jagger. And I think that's the way with the Pistols. There were four individuals doing four different things. You could only channel things through Johnny Rotten, whereas with the Clash, you could channel things through Joe Strummer, through Mick Jones, and to a certain extent through Paul Simonon as well. To be fair,
all of this in my mind is leading to a question, and we're talking about all of that stuff from '77 onwards that was angry. It was funny as well at times, but it was angry. How is it that '83, when times are really hard, and times in '83 were much, much harder than they were in '77, how is it that the music is so lightweight, frivolous?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what my opinion of that is, and it links to the football match that we're talking about, because we're talking about music, but really we're talking about a football match and seeing how the music of the time is a prism to understanding what was going on in the country and on the football pitch at the time. Okay, the punk thing came out of the first burst of anger, if you like, at the recession that we were in.
The model was starting to crack, wasn't it?
Yeah, and people and the youngsters were rebelling, and with a little bit of technology, they realised, well, hang on a second, I can make my voice heard at very little cost, and then the infrastructure gets in place to sort of distribute music through fanzines and that kind of thing, and to play gigs, in pubs. Literally, the punks just took over the sort of pub scene, which had been dominated by sort of middle-aged rockers, or at least rockers harking back or attracting middle-aged drinkers at the time. And by 1983, remember, we've had 4 years at that point of Mrs. Thatcher beating us down. I'm not making a political point about this, but certainly beating down the resistance one way or another. 4 years of it. And out 4 years, you can't win. You couldn't win against Thatcher. I'll give her that. She was going like, you turn if you want to. This lady wasn't for turning. Whether she had a handbag or a steel handbag, whatever the Russians, Iron Lady is what the Russians call her, of course, called her. And after 4 years of that, music scene, the rebelliousness in the music scene starts fading out. It's imploded to a certain extent as well, to be honest, in infighting, and whether some of it went more kind of left-wing towards trying to like fight the National Front, the fascists of the day, and the music scene that's emerging, a slightly different generation, is also now sort of like coming to terms with the fact that, hang on, remember, a lot of people did well out of Thatcher as well. So suddenly, you're seeing all these.
They did, but not so well then. And it's still bad times. I mean, the boom kind of, it's around the mid 86, 87 that you started to feel the boom. No?
The first thing that Mrs. Thatcher did when she came to government,
you could buy your council house.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, people love that.
Right, and so you suddenly turned people who were working class into middle class people with a pride in their home that they never had before. And you mentioned that all of these new romantics are coming from the suburbs. Where do you think they were buying council houses? They were buying in the suburbs as much as in the inner city, and they're coming out of middle class homes. The generation before that, or the generation before, well, Wham was in a city in any case, but
no, Wham is just down the road from me.
It's Southgate, wasn't it? Southgate.
No, it's Watford.
Oh, it's Watford. Okay, fair enough.
Just on the road from where I grew up, and George Michael could have gone to private school. And that's an immigrant thing, that's his dad.
But you see, I was thinking, because I grew up in Little Cyprus, which was Haringey in those days.
Yeah, I think that's where he was born.
Yeah,
but
and then they moved out.
Again, it's an immigrant thing.
It is, because all the Cypriots, all the Greek and Turkish Cypriots that lived in Haringey, in the stretch of Haringey between Manor House and Turnpike Lane, the mile of stretch of green lanes, they all moved a little bit north to Southgate and Palmer's Green. That's why I'm thinking, he's slightly younger than my generation. He must come from Palmer's Green to Southgate. That was so stereotypical, and I have to apologise to that. I have to apologise for that completely. But
no offence. But you're getting with the New Romantics. They're all Bowie boys, aren't they?
They're all from that generation, and
Yeah.
there's hardly any blacks there. I was coming on to that because that reflects what's going on in the picture as well. But yeah, go on.
True. And Wham, Elton John, that's one of their big influences, you know. So it's a generation that haven't been influenced by the Pistols and the Clash and the Specials. It's a generation whose influences are coming from other places.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't know where I always feel that New Romantics was somewhat constructed and dreamed up in a publicist's living room around a coffee table with 3 or 4 other bands or 3 or 4 other musicians that they couldn't quite pitch. And they thought, oh, well, why don't you dress up as like faux, romantics in terms of the Lakers in poetry, the Shelleys and all of these, the Byrons and everything like that, and then just write some sort of like lyrics that's sort of like ethereal or ephemerate or whatever it might be, and put a good melody to it, and then just pose on stage as if you look at this photograph of Lord Byron and do that on stage where Lord Byron's looking off into that is how it happened, mate. Yeah. I'm sure that's how it happened. Brilliant. If it's not how it happened, then I'll eat my hat. That's how it should have happened. And there he goes. Okay, let's get back to this football match. I mentioned,
so you're making a link with a lack of black faces on the field.
Well, I'm not only making a link with that, I'm also making a link with come out of the war with Argentina, the Falklands War. We're in a place where people have now bought their own council houses. It's not that we're content, but it's almost kind of like the old order has restored a semblance of the status quo. Uh-huh. The status quo in this match is that Manchester United are going to duff Brighton up. Do you see where I went with that?
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to duff. That's the status quo. So even though
we're all Gordon Smith. We are Gordon Smith, the Brighton striker who has the chance, and we blew that chance, and the old hierarchies imposed themselves.
Exactly, but it took them a rematch to impose themselves. Yes. The point is that rebelliousness that you talk of is still there. It's underlying all of this. It's still there. Just because it
blows over. And the next year is the miners' strike, which is the big test, isn't it? It's the decisive moment when trade union power is broken, and people are living now with the amount of rent that they pay or the amount of mortgage that they pay and the lack of protection they have at work. They're living with the consequences of '84. And there were all the riots in '85. It was a intense time. But we're living with the consequences of it now. When I talk to kids, if you try and talk them about, and the miners' strike was huge, and it radicalized a lot of people that I know, radicalized me more. And but people, when I speak to like kids of my mates, it's a world that they can't conceive, that they can't imagine. Like trade unions or something like that, it just seems abstract to them.
Do you know, I was at university at this time. When I came back from Sweden, I went back to university in 83, 84. And here in the UK, that is, in England. And I went to a pretty radical university, militant. And I was obliged, like so many others, to have, because, miners came on our campus to rally support and everything, and of course they're all from up north, far up north, so they had nowhere else to keep, and they didn't have any money. So I was obliged, like so many others, to take in a miner in your tiny little room in halls, and he was a good bloke, but it was a different world. And when he let one rip, I had suddenly realized that I could pretend as if I understand what the miners are about, but flipping heck, mate! I still got the aroma of it still wafts somewhere in the back of my mind. But remember, we're talking about New Romantics in terms of the music. Well, this first match, this final between Man United, which could never a replay could never happen again because FA Cup gets done and dusted on the day for TV rights and everything else. But in those days, you could go to a replay and a little bit more of a gate money.
There were none for years and years and years. And then it was like waiting for a bus because you had 3 in a row because the two previous years had gone to replays, and this one as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you remember what the buses are like over this side. Wonder if they're the same in Brazil. So this is David Lacey writing in The Guardian, and these are exact words. The 1983 FA Cup final pits logic against romance. Yeah, do you remember the logic of your arguments about the music of the day against the romance of the time? Pitch logic against romance, and for a major sporting occasion, this is surely the ideal plot. He's right. He's right. He's referencing what's going on in the real world as well. The logic of, hang on, we just fought a war against a couple of sort of conscripts and we're bigging ourselves up. What on earth is that about? Against the romance of, oh, at least we've got our own council houses or whatever it might be. It's exactly what this match is about. Today, Manchester United, who's progressed to Wembley for the second time this season and the 6th in 8 years, has gone strictly according to form, face Brighton and Hove Albion, who may be forgiven for pitching themselves up to the moment when they are summoned from their dressing room for the pre-match presentations and are hit by the roar of the crowd. You see, I don't think it's the roar of the crowd that gets them. I think when they're lining up in that tunnel to go out onto the pitch and they're looking at the Man United lot and they're looking at themselves, the Man United lot, who aren't as fit and gallant and statuesque as they are today. I remember seeing this when Man United played Millwall in, was it an FA Cup final? It was the FA Cup final, wasn't it? At Wembley. And then you saw Man United lot come out of the coach into sort of the underground garage of Wembley. And they all looked like stallions compared to the mares of Millwall, who had descended like half an hour earlier. I mean, the Millwall lot did look fit when they came off the bus, but when you saw the Man United lot, they just didn't look. And although both sides here aren't as physically fit, they're not, Adonises, they're not Cristiano Ronaldos. However, there is a difference. You look at the thighs of those Man United matches, and I'm sure those Brighton lot, when they were standing in line waiting to be brought onto the pitch, looked at those thighs and thought, we're going to get hit and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, mate. But they didn't show any fear. And one of them did get hit very early on, right in the midriff, from a ball by, who would it have been now? Oh, I can't remember which Man United player. It could even have been Ray Wilkins. But I've got a feeling it was Gordon. What's his name that was playing for Man United at the time?
Strachan wasn't there.
No, it wasn't Gordon Strachan. Was it? There was another Gordon.
Whiteside.
Yeah, it could have been Whiteside. Let's say it's Whiteside for the sake of argument. And anyway, he got hit in the midriff, and the camera sort of panned to where the ball was going. But I'd like to have seen that guy go, oh, that hurt. Because Man United kicked the ball a lot harder than Brighton in this game, and I think that's what kept them in it.
No black players. Would have had one. Remy Moses.
There was one black player for Brighton.
Oh, right. Brighton
Right back for Brighton.
Chris Ramsey.
Yeah, because
who lost his place for the replay. Maybe that's where it went all wrong.
Well, yeah, I remember John Motson, introducing all the players, and he says, "Yes, and there's Chris Ramsey of West Indian background." Right. He had to actually say, and West Indian, give me a flipping break.
But did he say here's Gary Bailey of South African background? Because he was a Man United goalkeeper. Yeah, maybe not. Remy Moses was suspended, so Remy Moses was injured, as he so often was. Terrier little midfielder for Man United, so he didn't play. But one foreign player, Arnold Muren, the cultured Dutchman with a wonderful left foot.
Indeed, and only two foreign players. It's an
entirely different game, isn't it? Yeah, so different from today.
Two foreign players, including the Man United goalie, of course. Then,
although Gary Bailey he actually played for England.
Oh well, then it was only one foreigner there.
English dad and I think born in South Africa, maybe, but certainly he spoke with a very strong South African accent.
Was the game as intense as we'd expect it to be,
well,
from today's perspective?
The pitch cut up very, very badly. The players weren't nearly as fit as they are now, and there was that thing of the tension of the occasion. Now, people used to talk about Wembley's sapping turf, and it wasn't. It wasn't any particularly more sapping the grass, than any other grass. It was just that the build-up. Players in FA Cup finals, they used to drop out with cramp all over the place, and that wasn't the properties of the grass. That was nervous tension. That was the whole build-up of weeks and weeks, and then the whole, the day that they probably hadn't slept the night before, and they've been up since 6 o'clock, and that nervous tension that takes it out on you.
Yeah, it does. Although you can't argue that the Wembley pitch is a bigger pitch than you would have been used to if you were a seagull. That pitch is there to enable the England team. It's not there to enable some team from the lower divisions to come out and think that they can be Man United. Whereas Man United have been more used to it. Second time that season they're on that pitch. They know what it's like.
I don't know why I thought about this, but I've just realised how much I miss Brighton.
Yeah,
I love going to the station. You get to the station and then the walk down.
Yeah,
down. I worked on the pier for one summer a few years afterwards.
What, in Brighton?
Yeah, in Brighton. Yeah,
flipping heck, mate.
I worked selling T-shirts on Brighton Pier.
Yeah,
in the summer of '87. I got a lot of affection for the place. I just saw it in my mind's eye. Now I just saw getting out of the railway station and walking down towards the beach.
Yeah. I wouldn't have kept my mind on the job if I know me. In any case, I probably wouldn't have kept my mind on the job, which is just as well that I didn't get a job. If they saw me coming, obviously, and thought, no, not him, not today, sunshine, as they used to say in those days. Okay, so it's going to go to a replay. I think the advantage will always be on the bigger team in a replay.
Sure. It's like a mini league then, isn't it? And then, the shorter the duration of time, the more chance there is of an upset. So the longer the duration of time, the more chance that the favourite is going to come out on top. That happened in 81, it happened in 82, it happened in 83.
Is that because of strength in depth, or is it because the top flight players are just
better?
Fit? Not better. It's better rather than fit.
I think so because the second game, I don't think it was decided on fitness. And Brighton actually started quite well the second game, and then bang, bang, bang. Before half time, it's all over. It's all taken away from them. Before tiredness has set in, it's the extra quality of United. And the longer time that they've got to show the extra quality, the more chance that they have of doing it. It's why Leicester winning the Premier League is so utterly unbelievable. Impossible until they did it, because Leicester might well win an FA Cup or something as shorter, but for Leicester to be Premier League champions at the end of 38 games, it can't possibly happen until it did.
Yeah, Ron Atkinson was born in Liverpool, by the way. He was born. Right. Yeah, you didn't realise that, did you?
No,
so I'm schooling you. I have to school you every now and then. You get to school me more.
Where did he grow up?
No, nowhere near Liverpool,
No.
because you can hear it in his voice, nowhere near Liverpool. But he was born in Liverpool, and that's the connection there. And I wonder if the manager in the replay has to take some credit. When Man United, like you say, over in the first half, so they must have found Brighton out, because Brighton would face Man United in the replay, and they set up pretty similar, as I recall, to the way they'd set up in
with Steve Foster. So they thought defensively that they were tighter. But I mean, the two in the middle, Wilkins and Robson, well, they were a terrific combination. Wilkins was full of wonderful passing, imaginative passing, mate. And Robson just had that thrust.
Different
and
league.
And the two of the three goals that they scored before half time are Brian Robson.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you're listening to the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, and you can get us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can watch the whole episode in the 1129 Media channel on YouTube. Now, a little bit of wrapping up to do. First of all, the thing that I wanted to bring up was just to give you a sense of where Britain was at this time. I want to point you to a headline. Unbelievable, because we're talking about 37 years ago. The headline is London Gay Plague Alert, if you can believe this. So we'd forgotten, hadn't we, that when AIDS reared its ugly head, people were talking of it as a gay plague. And this is from the Guardian's, the Observer's, so the day after the cup final, the day after, in the Observer, their science correspondent says, London could become the centre of a British epidemic of the mystery disease AIDS, which has so far killed more than 200 people, mostly homosexuals in America. Now, I don't blame the science correspondent, but I blame the editor for allowing that headline to be passed. The kind of headline that you couldn't dream of, or you couldn't dare pose today. And I wonder whether, when you ask about what the country was like at the time, that that kind of rhetoric plays very, very importantly in the rhetoric. We were a very divisive, or the nation was divided by politics perhaps, but we're very kind of divisive. It was a very divisive time, I think.
And it was very, very divisive. But, and I despise a lot of the things that happened then. But one thing, over the course of time, I will give the Tories some fair play for, is that I think in the end, they dealt with the AIDS plague thing reasonably well. They toned down the moralism, and it was a process of education in safe sex, and I think things could have been a lot worse.
Do you think that was? Well, I'm asking you a political question. How could you possibly know? I was just thinking your opinion, because as much as you say that, I wonder if it's like the current COVID crisis that we're in, and I think the government is trying to save people's lives, but nevertheless, it's as much to do with the impact of these things on wider society, that it's not necessarily from a moral point of view, if that makes sense. It's sometimes it's not because you have suddenly seen the light, as Hank Williams might put it, but more to do with, hang on, it's better if we do it this way.
Yeah, I'm too far away from England that they seem to have wobbled all over the place.
No, I wasn't thinking necessarily about COVID, but in terms of the AIDS, the change in narrative of AIDS at that time.
Well, it was surprising, because I remember being at college, between 84 and 87, which is the time when people, we're all going to die of it. We're all going to die of it. And it was a level-headed and pretty much non-moralistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
And mate, if this happened today, I think there would be more angry moralism going on.
Why do you think, moving back to the music through which we open a window to the FA Cup final, why do you think the Beats, one of the original two-tone groups, decided to cover an Andy Williams tune? Why not? And it's like a brilliant Andy Williams tune. He ain't done nothing wrong. Andy Williams has not put a foot wrong, and they've gone and done it, and you will never hear their version over Andy Williams played on any radio station ever.
For me, that's an example of that kind of movement that we were talking about, that starts in like 76 and gets new momentum in 79. It's an indicator of how that's run out of steam, because the Beat did some fantastic stuff, and poor old Ranking Roger, who we lost not long ago. It's another multiracial band from the Midlands.
But he doesn't get a word in. Doesn't get a word in edgeways. There's no.
It's a travesty, isn't it? And it's around the same time that UB40, who've done some great stuff as well, they start to become a karaoke band.
Well, yeah,
so it's the moment when that generation starts to run out of steam, 100%. And the next generation, as we're talking about, is a more frivolous one.
Well, and the Funboy 3 is a much more frivolous band from the specials that they started out in, and Our Lips Are Sealed. No room for Neville Staples, their rapper in that one. They relegate him to playing congas. basically. There is a decent tune, one more decent tune in the charts, number 9, F.R. David, whatever happened to him, and who was he? Words, because it's got good melody. It's got good melody. I passed over on number 8, Tears for Fears, Pale Shell. Oh, you're not having the F.R. David one, the Words? No, really?
No, I remember John Peel presenting it on Top of the Pops, and I think it was the week he called everyone the multi-talent. And when he went down a run of the charts, so not number 11, the multi-talented, and he did it with most irony when it was the multi-talented F.R. David.
On that note, I think you've made your point, and we've made our point on this edition of the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. Like I say, do make sure that you find us on Twitter, on YouTube, where you can watch the whole thing. And you can see him in his great, pair of sunglasses. Let's just put it that way. Red pair of sunglasses. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and on YouTube, on the 1129 Media YouTube channel. Legendino, thanks very much.
Thank you.